Hi everyone, and welcome to Lunch Hour Lessons with Allison. I'm Allison Mädl, and today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. Every week on Wednesdays at 12:30, I come to you live to introduce a topic related to nutrition and health that I think is interesting and give you a lesson to take with you into your daily life. If you like what you hear, feel free to comment or like this video. And as always, I post a transcript of each lesson on my blog at AllisonMädl.com. This week's topic is Alzheimer's disease, type 3 diabetes. Recently, one of my close family members was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and it got me thinking about the different research on the subject that I've been seeing emerge recently. One of the major theories of why Alzheimer's disease can emerge in some people has to do with something that I've talked about in a lot of other lunch hour lessons, and that is blood sugar regulation. Some researchers are now associating Alzheimer's disease with type 3 diabetes. And why would that be? It's important to first understand how heavily the brain relies upon glucose for fuel. In humans, the brain actually accounts for only about 2% of the body weight, yet it composes or it takes in about 20% of the body's glucose. So it has a really high energy need, and it makes it the main consumer of glucose out of all of our organs. Glucose is the simple sugar, remember, that all other sugars and foods break down into. So all food intake eventually turns into glucose, whether it starts as proteins, fats, or carbohydrates. They can all be converted into glucose for fuel. And because of that, we don't really need to eat a lot of glucose itself in our daily diet carbohydrates in its pure form. What happens in our American population is that we eat an imbalance of carbohydrate-rich foods at the expense of foods rich in healthy fats and protein. And we've been conditioned away from adding fat to our food in the form of butter and cream and lard, or eating high-protein meats like red meat out of a misguided belief that these are going to make us fat and cause heart disease. So instead, we often provide our bodies with fuel from mostly high carbohydrate sources, some of which are considered healthy, like low-fat grains and fruit, and others which aren't, like sugary sodas and pastries. And eating a daily, for example, fat-free breakfast with orange juice and oatmeal and maybe some raisins on top, and then also making a habit out of indulging in sugary treats regularly means that a large amount of glucose is quickly converted into our bodies, in our bloodstream, and that's happening regularly. So over time, what happens with any diabetic progression, the cells get full of sugar and they kind of stop, or they do stop wanting to receive any more glucose. So instead, the glucose that is trying to get into the cells keeps circulating around in the bloodstream, making our blood sugar numbers rise higher and higher. And because the hormone insulin, the name of it is insulin, that's the messenger that tells the cells to let the glucose in, the condition where the cells are too full of glucose to accept any more of that glucose, that's called insulin resistant. Basically, the cells are not receptive to the messenger of insulin anymore. And if this kind of pattern continues unchanged, then this can result in diabetes. So we started talking about Alzheimer's disease, and what can happen with Alzheimer's is that the cells of the brain itself become resistant to insulin's message. And so the brain cells themselves are not able to accept more glucose. Now, there are many theories as to why Alzheimer's disease develops in some people, and it's not always a dietary issue. Sometimes it can be a genetic predisposition that then dietary issues can exacerbate. Remember, it's not just high sugar treats that are definitely, causing this progression towards insulin resistance. It can be just any general carbohydrate sources that are maybe in excess coupled with not enough healthy fats or protein in the diet. And because glucose then can't get into those brain cells when we get that insulin resistant condition going on, the cells basically start starving and they can't function properly anymore because they've lost their fuel source. They've reduced in power and function. And this is the beginning of cognitive decline. So it's a little counterintuitive. There's too much glucose, but it can't get into the brain cells. That's the problem. It's circulating in the bloodstream instead, getting higher and higher. And some researchers and clinicians have found that luckily there is an alternative fuel source for the brain cells, and that may help nourish them when glucose doesn't work anymore. And this alternate fuel is composed of ketones. And ketones are an energy source from fats that the brain can use instead. So the body only makes ketones when carbohydrate intake is very low. So it basically involves switching from a high carbohydrate, low fat diet to more of a high fat, low carbohydrate diet. And coconut oil is especially therapeutic for Alzheimer's disease. If someone you know is suffering from Alzheimer's disease, I'd really recommend reading up on the research about it. Some of the new theories that are coming out are really interesting, and this type 3 diabetic concept is definitely a contender, one of them. In my weekend tip on Saturday, I'll also share a couple of good books on the subject. So that's all the time we have for today. Feel free to tell a friend this week's lunch hour, this week's lunch hour lesson, which is a high carbohydrate diet could be a major driver of cognitive decline. Again, a high carbohydrate diet could be a major driver of cognitive decline. Like my page to get the weekend tip that comes out on Saturday, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.